I will now call this meeting to order. Please turn off your phones until the meeting is over. That'd be appreciated. In order to call attendance, I will now conduct a roll call by calling each councilor's name. Councilors, when I call your name, please say here. Mayor Steele. Councilor Aquilina.
Here.
Councilor Beauregard.
Here.
Councilor Bogner. Here. Councilor Bruno.
Here.
Councilor Danch. Here. Councilor Elliott.
Here.
Councilor Hoyle.
Here.
And Deputy Mayor Baggio. Okay, adoption of the agenda. Mover, if you please, Councilor Hoyle, Secretary Councilor Elliott. That the public meeting agenda dated April 4th, 2023 be confirmed and circulated. If any councilors has a question about the agenda, please raise your hand now. Thank you. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Motion is carried. Disclosures of interest. Any? Councilor Beauregard?
I have I have an indirect pecuniary interest on, which item is it? On item 4.2, as I am employed by the agent for the applicant.
Thank you, Councilor Beauregard. Where's that one? 4.2. And Mayor Steele has also declared a conflict of interest on item 4.2. Thank you. We will now proceed with item 4.1, public meeting report for official plan amendment D09-02-23, Parkland dedication 2023-65. If you please, Councilor Danch, seconded by Councilor Bruno. Okay. In attendance are City of Port Colborne planning staff, Mr. Chris Rome, planner, and Chief Planner, Mrs. Denise Landry. Mr. Room.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Baggio, and good evening, Council, and to all the members of the public here today. The purpose of this meeting, is pursuant to Section 22 of the Planning Act, is to consider an application initiated by the City of Port Colborne for all lands within the municipal boundaries. The application for official plan amendment has been proposed to ensure that the city's official plan complies with the recent changes to the Planning Act by removing parts of the current parkland dedication section of the official plan and replacing them with the revisions under Bill 23. Notice of the public meeting was administered in accordance with Section 22 of the Planning Act as amended in Ontario Regulation 543/06. The notice of public meeting was circulated. I'm going to go back there just real quick. The notice of public meeting was circulated internally to the required agencies on March 15th, 2023. The notice was also placed in the Niagara This Week newspaper on March 9th, 2023. Meeting details have been provided along with the council agenda on the city's website under current applications. As of the date of this meeting, staff have not received any comments from the public, and the following comments have been received from the Niagara region. Regional staff note that in accordance with NOP policies and the Memorandum of Understanding, the local official plan amendment as reviewed is exempt from regional council approval as parkland dedication is a local planning matter. The procedure to be followed this evening will be to present Development and Legislative Services Department Planning Division Report 2022-65, receive questions of clarification from Council, open the meeting to the public for comments, and announce the requirements under the Planning Act for written notice of adoption and passage of the proposed official plan amendment. At this time, Deputy Mayor, I would like to present Planning Division Report 2023-65. So the location and context, the proposed changes to the official plan are not site-specific and will apply to all lands within the municipal boundaries of the City of Port Colborne. When development requiring the collection of parkland dedication is proposed within the municipal boundaries, the proposed provisions of the official plan will be triggered. There may be instances of exemptions to parkland provisions that will be provided through a formal revision to the parkland dedication bylaw that will be brought forward at a later date should this amendment be approved. The City of Port Colborne official plan currently states under section 11.5.1C1 that as a condition of development or redevelopment, parkland dedication in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act is required. For high or medium density residential development, planning parkland dedication of 1 hectare for every 300 dwelling units is required. That rate of 1 hectare for every 300 dwelling units is the old alternative rate provided under the Planning Act prior to Bill 23. The Bill 23 changes have altered the alternative rate, which we can get into on this slide here. So the official plan amendment proposes to amend the rate at which parkland dedication is collected based on the recent changes of Bill 23 and provide clarity that the standard rate of collection or the alternative rates may be collected depending on which rate yields more land or cash in lieu. The standard rate is not changing, but will be more clearly identified within the official plan. Section 11.5.1C1 of the official plan is proposed to be removed and replaced with the following. For the dedication of physical parkland, the size of said land shall be determined by calculating 5% for residential and 2% for commercial and industrial of the total area of the proposal, or by providing 1 hectare per 600 net residential units, whichever is greater. And where the collection of cash in lieu of parkland dedication has been identified pursuant to section 11.5.1D of this plan, the applicant shall pay cash in lieu of parkland dedication determined by an appraisal of 5% for residential and 2% for commercial or industrial, or the total area of the proposal, or 1 hectare per 1,000 net residential units, again, whichever is greater. These proposed sections will give staff the opportunity to use the parkland rate that will yield the most parkland or cash in lieu. It is important to note that while Bill 23 has reduced the alternative rates to 1 hectare per 600 net residential units for physical land and 1 hectare for 1,000 net residential units for cash in lieu, whereas they used to be 1 hectare for every 300, the city will effectively not be collecting less, as the 5% or 2% provisions still apply. And we have the option now, if granted, to apply both. I'm just going to switch to the next slide here. So at this time, Your Worship, are there any questions of clarification for planning staff?
Councilors, are there any questions? Councilor Bruno?
Thank you, Your Worship. Is this the portion, Chris, where you would like us to speak to the proposal with respect to 5%, or are you going to delay that till after the public comment?
I guess it depends on what your question is.
I was really going to look at the situation for individual consents where they've already been granted. Will they remain under the old rule of at time of building permit, or will they be brought forward now, or does this encompass them at all?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Bruno. That will be addressed through the bylaw. It won't be addressed as a part of this official plan amendment. The reason that we are bringing this forward now is because we are looking to amend the parkland bylaw. And in order to do so, we actually needed to amend the official plan first. And then Bill 23 came along, so it just kind of worked out nicely. But just to go back to your question about retroactively collecting parkland, I don't know if it would be the most appropriate for us to do that after the fact, because when those conditions were granted, when consent was granted, the conditions stated that they signed a memorandum of understanding making them aware. And if the consent was granted, we gave them a certificate, it means that they signed off on all those conditions. So it might not be appropriate for us to be retroactively asking for parkland dedication on those granted consents.
I guess where I was going with that is other than advancing the money or being given a deadline, when they now come and want to build the old consents, they'll be paying then, which would be the value of the land today.
Right.
If it was a new draft plan to subdivision or somebody coming in getting a consent, it would be the price of today anyways. It's just whether you can clean up the old list as opposed to waiting for those ones that are in a queue or being owned by somebody is going to happen. So
right.
I take your point on that.
Yeah, and just to add on to that through you, Deputy Mayor, we'll get into it more in the bylaw, which I suppose we might bring forward at the time of this recommendation report too. By making that a condition of the consent, it'll clean things up a lot more moving forward, so that hopefully 20, 40 years from now, we won't have to be dealing with vacant lots that haven't paid parkland dedication. As of right now, though, they're required to pay it at the time of the building permit, so it's not like the money is just not being paid, it's just being paid at a different time.
That's all I have. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilor Bruno. So I gather, Mr. Room, when your report comes back for recommendation for council, probably that will be included in there somewhere. And okay.
Yeah, to you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think we're going to try to work towards getting the revised bylaw sent at the same time as the recommendation report, just to speed things along.
Okay, thank you. Councilors, any other questions? Oh, continue, Mr. Room.
Thank you. I'm just going to go to the next slide here. So before I open the meeting to the public, I would like to read the following. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Port Colborne before a decision on the proposed official plan amendment is passed by council, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the City of Port Colborne Council to the Ontario Land Tribunal. To any interested members of the public, if you would like to receive future notices regarding this application, please contact me by email at chris.room@portcolborne.ca. My email is up on the screen there if you'd like to write it down, or by phone at 905-835-2900. My extension is 205, or you can contact the acting clerk at clerk@portcolborne.ca. To any members of the public in attendance in the council chambers, there is a sign-in sheet at the back where you can sign your name to receive future notices regarding this application. Just a quick note on that for anybody that is here. The sign-in sheet is at the back left of the room there. There are 2 applications tonight, so there are 2 sign-in sheets effectively. I assume most of you are here for the Westwood application, so on the left there's a much bigger sign-in sheet. And then the parkland dedication one is on the right. So if you're interested in parkland dedication, it's on the right side of the table. And that's all I got there.
Thank you, Mr. Room. Is there anyone in attendance from the public who'd like to speak on item 4.1, which is parkland dedication? Okay. Please proceed up to the podium. Just
Thank you.
state your name and address and push the little red button, please.
I just, I'm sitting back here and thinking, gosh, I should have read something before I came. May I ask, are we referring parkland dedication to existing parks right now, in that they may be shrunk, given that there aren't as many residents, or because of the ratio has been significantly halved? Or are we referring to the park land designated area in the Westwood subdivision? That's really what I'd like clarification on. So in other words, if our proposed demonstration plan goes from 315 units to, let's just say for fun, 100, that would therefore significantly decrease the parkland dedication in that area. Is that what you're talking about?
Can you please state your name and address first?
I'm so sorry. I forgot. Janice
you.
Arcaro, 14 Debbie Crescent, in our lovely city.
Thank you, Jess. I know you, so, but for the record.
I know pretty much.
Mr. Room would like to answer that question now, or?
I can answer it now, yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the member of the public. This application does apply citywide, and there may be aspects of it that will be applying to the Westwood application itself. Generally speaking, it won't be affecting existing physical parkland. It's not like we're going to be shrinking parks. The parks that exist are going to continue to exist. And in fact, it's worded in such a way that it might yield more cash in lieu to maintain those parks. But effectively, no, the parks won't be changing. It's just a policy that in the future requires us to collect park land or cash in lieu of park land if they can't provide physical land. So when somebody comes forward with a development for us, we're going to say, okay, you need to provide us with a park, and if you can't provide us with a park, you need to provide us with cash so that we can either invest in our parks or parks infrastructure.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Ray.
Yeah. Thanks for your question, Janice. Are there any other members of the public like to talk about 4.1? Okay. Please proceed, Mr. Room.
Thank you. If you wish to be notified of the approval of this official plan amendment, you must make a written request to the clerk. Only those persons and public bodies that give the clerk a written request for the notice of the adoption and passing of the official plan amendment will be given notice. The proposed official plan amendment will return to council at a future date, and that concludes my portion of the public meeting, and I will now turn the meeting back to you, Deputy Mayor Bagu, to close the public portion of the meeting and receive the report for information.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rubin. I'll make a motion that planning and any other questions before I make the motion, councilors? Okay. So the motion that planning and development department report 2023-65 be received for information. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. The motion is carried. We will now proceed with item 4.2, public meeting report for proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for Westwood Estates, Phase 3, 2023-59. I could have Councilor Hoyle, Councilor Aquilina, mover and seconder. Okay. In attendance are, of course, Mr. Craig Rowe, Senior Planner. Senior Planner for Upper Canada Consultants. And City of Port Colborne Planning Staff, Mr. David Schultz, who is Senior Planner, and Mrs. Denise Landry to my right, who is the Chief Planner. Mr. Schultz.
I'm just going to switch seats because I think the camera is aimed at that seat instead of this one. All right, sorry about that. Good evening, Deputy Mayor, Council, members of the public in attendance and or watching at home. The purpose of this meeting is pursuant to sections 22 and 34 of the Planning Act and to consider an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by the applicant Craig Rowe of Upper Canada Consultants on behalf of the owner Lester Schultz Limited for the lands known as Westwood Estates Phase 3, legally known as part of Lot 33, Concession 1, Geographic Township of Humberstone, now in the City of Port Colborne, within the municipal regional of Niagara. The official plan amendment proposes to amend and redefine the land use designations on Schedule G of the Westwood Park Secondary Plan in the Port Colborne official plan. The zoning bylaw amendment proposes to change the zoning of the subject lands from residential development to a site-specific third density residential zone, site-specific fourth density residential zone, public and park zone, environmental protection zone, and environmental conservation layer zone. The applicant has also submitted a draft plan of subdivision for the proposed lands to establish the road network and the lots and blocks. Notice of this public meeting was administered in accordance with sections 22 and 34 of the Planning Act as amended and Ontario Regulations 543/06 and 545/06. Notice of the public meeting was circulated on March 14th, 2023 to internal departments and agencies. Notice was also circulated via regular mail to property owners within 120 meters. Meeting details have been provided along with the council agenda on the city's website and under current applications. As of the date of this meeting, staff has received comments from the following commenting agencies. From the bylaw division, no adverse comments at this time, and they note that cement and cement plant road names between the city and Wainfleet are under review. The drainage superintendent does not have any objections at this time. From the District School Board of Niagara, they currently have no objections to the application. They request that sidewalks be constructed within the development to facilitate student travel to bus stops, and they note that future students would attend Steele Street and Port Colborne High School. From CN Rail, no comments concerning the application. From the fire department, they don't have any concerns at this time, but they do have a number of draft plan conditions that would provide for fire safety. From Enbridge, no objection to the proposed application. However, Enbridge reserves the right to amend or remove development conditions. From Hydro One, no comments or concerns at this time. From the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, they have a high level of concern at this time and have requested a meeting with planning staff to discuss the extent of the comments and concerns. The comments and concerns will be addressed through future recommendation report. And we are also expecting formalized comments from the Niagara Region, Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, and engineering staff, and note that these are forthcoming and will be included in the future recommendation report. At this time, a preliminary comment from the NPCA has been received stating the NPCA is currently not in a position to provide draft conditions to support this application. The procedure to be followed this evening will be to present Development and Legislative Services Report, Department 2023-59, pass the meeting to the applicant to provide a presentation, hear any comments or questions of clarification from council to the applicant or planning staff, open the meeting to the public for comments, and announce the requirements under the Planning Act for written notice of passage of the applications. At this time, I'd like to present Development and Legislative Services Public Hearing Report 2023-59. The areas surrounding the subject lands are predominantly low-density residential uses. Existing residential uses are located to the north, east, and south of the subject lands, and to the west of the property is the Township of Wainfleet and conservation lands, commonly known as the Clay Pits. The City of Port Colborne official plan currently designates the subject property within the Westwood Park Secondary Plan area. The Westwood Park Secondary Plan sets out the overall land use of the subject lands as well as the applicable policies for the development of the land. The official plan amendment proposes to amend the designations within the secondary plan area and refine the location and extent of natural heritage features and floodlines, stormwater management facilities, parks and open space, as well as low and medium density residential areas. The neighborhood commercial special policy areas are proposed to be deleted, and a site-specific policy amendment is proposed along with the mapping modifications to reduce the required wetland buffer width from 30 meters to 15 meters. The current zoning of the subject property is residential development and environmental protection. And the application for zoning bylaw amendment proposes to change the zoning of the subject lands from residential development to a site-specific third density residential zone, site-specific fourth density residential zone, public and park zone, environmental protection zone, and environmental conservation layer zone. And adjustments to the site-specific regulations are proposed, as well as including setbacks, landscaping buffers between townhouses and single detached zones, apartment building density, and covered porch setbacks. And as noted, the applicant has also submitted a draft plan of subdivision. The application for draft plan of subdivision will divide the subject land into 167 lots for single detached dwellings, 10 blocks for 52 street townhouse dwellings, and 1 apartment block that will proposes to have 96 apartment dwelling units. There's parquet blocks, a stormwater management block, and environmental protection / conservation areas. At this time, Your Worship, I'd like to pass the floor to the applicant, Craig Rowe, for a brief presentation.
Mr. Rowe. Welcome, Mr. Rowe. You might have a busy night tonight, we'll see.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor Bagu, members of council, staff, and members of the public. My name is Craig Rowe. I'm a senior planner with Upper Canada Consultants. We're based out of St. Catharines, and our address is 30 Hanover Drive. I actually get the clicker. This is great. Perfect. So with me this evening is the owner of subject lands, Mr. Todd Schultz, who's sitting in the front row over there. Also with me are members of our project consulting team, so that we can be available to answer any questions that council may have, or members of the public as well. With me this evening I have Mr. Brendan Kaptein, who's our engineer, Ann McDonald, who is our biologist, and Mr. Matthew DeMaria, who's our transportation engineer. Oops. Sorry, skipped out of there. There we go. So tonight the public meeting pertains to the submit official plan and zoning bylaw amendments for the subject lands. There's a related draft plan of subdivision application with these two other applications. However, due to legislative changes, these applications are no longer subject to public meetings. We will of course provide some cursory overview of the application, as it requires the policy and zoning amendments to be implemented in order to be developed. So our presentation this evening is going to utilize the following outline. First, an overview of the site context and previous phases of development, overview of the applications and the planning framework, the proposed amendments to the Westwood Park Secondary Plan, an overview of the proposed zoning, an overview of key and unique development elements, an overview of the completed studies and conclusions, and then the next steps related to this application. So in terms of the situation of the subject lands, they're located at the western limit of the urban boundary and municipal boundary of the city of Port Colborne. The lands are generally located south of Stanley Avenue, west of Cement Plant Road, east of Olga Drive, and north of Lakeshore Road. To the west is the municipal boundary with the township of Wainfleet. The subject lands do not currently have a municipal address. They're only known by their legal description, which is part of Lot 33, Concession 1. So as I've noted, this is Phase 3 of Westwood Estates. The previous phases of Westwood Estates are located north of the subject lands between Stanley Avenue and the former quarry lands. Phase 1 of Westwood Estates, which is shown in the orange color on the screen right here, was registered in 1983 and contained 58 single detached housing lots. Phase 2 of the Westwood Estates development was registered in 2016 and consisted of 20 single detached dwellings and 3 blocks for multiple development, including townhomes and semi-detached dwellings. This phase of development is currently nearing build-out, and like Phase 3, the Phase 2 lands are also within the Westwood Park secondary plan area. The Phase 3 lands measure approximately 30.5 hectares, or 75.3 acres in size. The property is a large contiguous parcel bounded by existing detached development in Phase 2 to the north, Sunset Park and existing detached dwellings to the east, the Eagle Marsh Drain to the south, and Cement Plant Road and the municipal boundary to the west. The subject lands currently have available roadway access from Sugarloaf Street, Lancaster Drive, and Cement Plant Road. The property has been evaluated by our consulting biologists, geoscientists, and engineers who have confirmed the presence of 2 wetland features on the property. There's one to the north and then one on the south end. And also a floodplain associated with the Eagle Marsh Drain at the south end of the property. There's also an existing man-made drainage channel, which you should be able to see on the aerial, kind of arcing down from the top and down below. This supports Westwood Estates Phase 2 and serves as a drainage channel that drains all the stormwater down towards the Eagle Marsh Drain and eventually out into Lake Erie. Once we have reviewed the different constraints consisting of the natural heritage features, the drainage channel that we have on site, and confirming the floodplain through site analysis, we're able to compile and design a new neighborhood development plan for Westwood Estates Phase 3. So as an overview of the applications that we have before you this evening, the public meeting pertains to the official plan zoning amendment, but of course they're linked into the draft plan subdivision. So the draft plan subdivision consists of 167 lots for single detached dwellings. So these are ranging in frontage sizes between 12 meters to 18 meters. So that's ranging between 40 and 60 feet of frontage. There's 10 blocks that will allow for the development of 52 street townhouse dwellings. 96 multiple dwelling units on the block out along Cement Plant Road. It has a flexible zoning that we've put forward, which essentially allows for the construction of an apartment building, or it also allows for the construction of a typical, like a vacant land condo development where you see condominium townhouses supported by private roads. Also included in this are parklands and a new trail system, environmental protection blocks, and blocks for the stormwater management ponds required to support the development. The official plan amendment has a couple components to it. The first is to modify the layout and designations of the Westwood Park secondary plan. The next is to reduce wetland buffers from 30 meters to 15 meters for those features that we've identified, and then to remove the neighborhood commercial areas. And with regards to the zoning bylaw amendment, as Mr. Schultz alluded to, currently the subject lands have a residential development zone, which is effectively a holding provision. It requires that any development other than existing uses, you would have to bring a zoning amendment forward to the city. So we are required to bring that application forward. That zoning amendment generally is consisting of a few different zones. The first is using the R3 zone. It permits everything from the proposed single detached dwellings as well as the street townhouses. The R4 block is a little bit more higher density. That will be used for the multiple residential block along Cement Plant Road. We also have environmental protection, environmental conservation zones, which are going to correlate with those natural heritage features we've evaluated and found. And the P zone, park and public space, and that will apply to the parks, the trails, and the stormwater management ponds. So I put together just a couple of quick composition slides just to allow everyone to orient themselves to where the different types of development are on the subject lands. So shown in yellow on the screen is the location of all the proposed single detached dwellings. So this is the majority of the composition of the subdivision. As you can see, the single detached dwellings generally bound the outer limits of the subdivision, single detached adjacent to existing single detached dwellings, and also in the middle of the development as well. Next, the street townhouse dwellings are clustered within the middle and parceled out amongst the single detached dwellings to provide a bit of variety on the different streets. This is the condominium townhouse or apartment block, the high-density block. It would be located along Cement Plant Road, and it would have its own access provided from that street. Next are the trails and stormwater channel. So as you can see in the dark blue, this is the location of the stormwater management ponds. The light blue corresponds with the existing drainage channel that drains Westwood Estates Phase 2. And then the green correlates with the proposed parkettes as well as the proposed trail system for the development. And then lastly, the environmental protection, environmental conservation areas. The dark green indicates the confirmed boundaries in the 15-meter buffer of the provincially significant wetlands. And then the lighter green down at the bottom of your screen correlates with the environmental conservation area, which is a proposed planting buffer between existing and proposed development. Together, all these different elements come together to give us our demonstration plan for Westwood Estates Phase 3, which you can see is a mix of natural spaces, a mix of different housing types, and also public amenity areas included. In terms of the planning framework, the subject lands are located within the Port Colborne settlement area and urban area, and therefore they're subject to the 2020 provincial policy statement, the provincial growth plan, Niagara Region's official plan, and the City of Port Colborne official plan. I'm happy to discuss any of the details of the policies that apply to this development, but I feel it's most important to focus on the composition of the development for the benefit of the residents that are here this evening. But what I will say is, as I put forth in my planning report, it's my opinion as a professional planner that the applications are consistent with the 2020 provincial policy statement and conform with the growth plan, the region's official plan, and the City of Port Colborne official plan, save and except for the amendment that we are proposing. So the Westwood Park Secondary Plan, Schedule G, is shown up on the screen right now. So the Westwood Park Secondary Plan is a detailed land use plan approved by the city, which is meant to guide development in the western end of the community. Overall, its limits are inclusive of Westwood Estates Phase 2 and Phase 3. The secondary plan supersedes the local official plan mapping and policies, outlining specific development objectives, goals, and requirements to be reviewed and considered through development applications, such as the draft plan subdivision, the official plan amendment, and the zoning bylaw amendment. The secondary plan is a valuable tool which can go beyond the general high-level policy direction of most official plans. However, like an official plan, they should be reviewed regularly to ensure they reflect community needs, development constraints, and recent developments within or on adjacent lands. This plan has not been reviewed in great detail since its integration into the city's official plan in 2012, 11 years ago. Since that time, Phase 2 has developed. We've been through substantial changes in growth and housing projections and changes to the environment. The proposed official plan amendment seeks to modernize the plan and provide reasonable and appropriate alterations to layout and policy to effectively develop a highly compatible neighborhood design. So this image on the screen shows the existing Westwood Park secondary plan as it pertains to Phase 3, as well as the official plan amendment schedule. This is what the proposed changes would be to the mapping. Although the primary layout is generally the same, there have been some adjustments that have been made to the extent of the features and locations of certain development elements. So I'll walk you through those right now. First of all, the general road pattern is consistent with the original plan. However, we've added some additional bends in the streets to facilitate development and limit traffic speed and infiltration, so people cutting through the neighborhood. The way that this is set up as well is we have a lot of terminating vistas, which is basically when you come to a road to have housing behind it rather than an open view. So it creates a sense of community and encloses the design of the neighborhood. Second, the stormwater management ponds have been located on the plan on the left-hand side. In the green is where the storm ponds were supposed to go. We've completed a detailed topographic survey to get the lay of the land. As usual, water goes downhill to the lowest point. The areas we've identified are where the water naturally drains, so we've adjusted the plan to put the stormwater management ponds where we know that the water is going to drain to. We've also integrated a mix of smaller single detached dwellings and street townhouses on the central streets to create a better mix of dwelling types. As you can see with the original Westwood Park secondary plan, the uses were not integrated together. They were located, this is townhouses, this is singles, this is townhouses. We've integrated them a little bit better to create a little bit more of a unique streetscape and a blend of different housing types. The extent of the wetland features have also been field verified by our biologists and have been subject to the recommendation of a 15-meter buffer. This is not an exercise that is done to facilitate more development opportunities. When these features are evaluated by our biologists, and we also complete a water balance study by our geoscientists, they look at the integrity and the health of the feature and what would be required to sufficiently buffer that feature and protect it for the long term. Based on our findings of that, it was determined that a 15-meter buffer is sufficient, and therefore the 30-meter buffer that was provided in the secondary plan was a bit of an arbitrary measure that was done at the time. Based on this scientific study that's been completed, we feel confident that the 15-meter buffer is appropriate, and we've adjusted the plan in that matter, which allows for a more efficient development layout. The ECA feature on the eastern end of the property was evaluated indeed to be consisting of invasive and non-native species as well as dead trees. This proposed plan, so on the original plan, the ECA buffer is the brown portion. On this plan, you can see it, although smaller on the eastern end of the development, is a 7-meter planted buffer. So this buffer will be included in the lots that are proposed on the side on Street C. And within this area, it will have native planting species in it to restore the planting buffer and serve as a small woodland habitat for urban animals. Lastly, the neighborhood commercial blocks have been removed. There's been no demonstrated need for additional commercial development in this area of the municipality, and certainly as the way that work is changing right now, recent census data has shown that up to 20% of people are working from home. So despite the removal of those elements, we still feel there's sufficient opportunities for employment within this neighborhood. Next is an overview of the zoning changes, and this corresponds with my comments that I had previously. As shown in the orange area, this would be subject to the R3 zoning. This permits single detached dwellings and permits townhouses. The R4 zoning corresponds to the multiple residential block, which is where the condominium development or apartment building would be. The dark green is the environmental protection zone, and the light green is the park and public zone. And you can also see in the bottom corner there with the red hatching, that corresponds with the environmental conservation planted buffer area. So there are a few key elements that are unique to this development that I would just like to draw council and members of the public's attention to. The first is a new trail system that's proposed within this development. This is being done by utilizing the top of bank associated with that existing drainage channel. So the intention is to create a path that runs along the side of the drainage channel and creates permeation into the neighborhood where people can go for a walk with their dog, hop on a bike and get through the neighborhood, but also new connections through the existing wetland feature over to Sunset Park, allowing everybody in the neighborhood to easily get over to the park and enjoy it. This sort of development and putting trails through wetland features is permitted, subject to MPCA review. It's something that we'll be looking at more closely through detailed engineering design. Next is the installation of a new roundabout at Cement Plant Road and where the Sugarloaf extension would be ending. This has been done for a couple of reasons. It serves as a good landmark feature as an entrance to the neighborhood. It also has the ability to slow vehicle speeds. Certainly speeding on Cement Plant Road is a known issue that's been around for the longest time. In Port Colborne, I grew up here. I know everybody went to go test their car out there. So we feel that this improvement, and this is supported by a transportation study, this will help slow the traffic speeds out in there and create a better environment for people that may be walking or cycling along Cement Plant Road. Lastly is the wooded buffer area. So this is an installation going against the existing development on the crescents that back onto the development on the east side. So it's a 7-meter, about a 23-foot wide buffer that's going to be between the development. It's going to include dense native species, likely a lot of coniferous to provide full screening throughout the years. Deciduous doesn't do a very good job of providing year-round screening because the leaves fall off. And this area is going to be included as part of the new lots on the side of Street C. And they'll be designated and zoned as such. So the only way that this could ever be touched would be at the approval of City Council. So it ensures the long-term protection of the feature. Just briefly touching on some of the required studies and reports that were prepared in support of this development, there was a lot of legwork that went into determining the constraints on the property and also evaluating whatever risks or things that we needed to confirm. The first was the completion of a functional servicing and stormwater management plan. What this study is it's a preliminary look at how this development can be serviced and to ensure that there's appropriate stormwater management infrastructure either available or that can be provided to ensure that there's no drainage, no runoff issues with adjacent properties. Next was the completion of stage 1 to 3 archaeological assessment. Stage 1 is a desktop exercise where you look at a property and say, does it have any potential? Stage 2 is some test pitting that's done, and through those works, some Euro-Canadian artifacts from the 1800s were discovered. We've been in consultation with our archaeologist who has completed the stage 3 work. Effectively, they found some dishes and plates, and he said the best way to kind of communicate what they found is They believe it was an old farmstead building, may have been on the property, and people were piling their stuff. So typically when people put the stuff behind their shed, this is the 1800s version of that. And we're in consultation with Mississaugas of the New Credit just to bring them up to speed, because typically they do not have an interest in Euro-Canadian artifacts, only Aboriginal artifacts. Next, we completed a transportation impact study, which was completed by R.V. Anderson Associates, another local firm. And what this did was take a look at all the proposed roadways in our development and any impacts on adjacent roadways and intersections. The conclusions of that report was that there would be no impact to the capacity or functionality of the existing road network surrounding, and that the roundabout that is proposed would have a significant safety improvement in the area over on Cement Plant Road. Next, we completed an environmental impact study. What this did is took a cursory look over the course of a couple of seasons at the composition of features on the property, help better delineate their boundaries and provide recommendations for buffering, and where we can designate and zone to protect those features for the long term. Part of that was a water balance feature, which is ensuring that some of these features, like the wetland to the south, for example, is fed by overland drainage from rainfall. The water balance helps us confirm that even when we develop, there's enough open area that water will continue to feed to that feature and support its long-term health. What's interesting about the southern wetland is also fed by Lake Erie. When we get a wave uprush, the water pushes down the Eagle Marsh drain and helps keep it saturated throughout the season. And then lastly was the completion of a planning justification report, which I authored, which outlines how the applications are consistent or conform with any applicable planning legislation. So to wrap up, our next steps are to receive and review any public and agency comments that we see tonight, as well as in writing from city staff. It'll be our duty to respond to those comments and address them as required. Following that, when staff is satisfied that all the issues have been covered off and the application is appropriate to move forward to council for a recommendation, council will make a decision on that application. If it's approved, we will move into detailed engineering design on this and clearance of any conditions that are applied to the development, and then ultimately registration. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time this evening, bearing with me through this presentation. And members of council, I'm here to answer any questions you may have, and feel free to call on any members of my team as well. They're ready to answer any questions you have about transportation, engineering, natural heritage, anything to that regard. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Rowe. We'll keep you up there for a few more minutes. Council, have any questions for Mr. Schultz or Mr. Rowe or any part of the planning consultants? I have Councilor Bruno. Anyone else? Councilor Elliott at this time. Okay. Councilor Bruno.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Through you to Mr. Rowe. Very good presentation. There was a point there where I'd just like some clarification. You were moving at a pretty good clip there. The area that was a 30-meter buffer now reduced to 15. Can you point that out for me again?
Certainly. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the question, I'll point it out on the screen here, but everybody else is at the bottom of the plan. So where you see the trees along here, Councilor Bruno, right. That is the 7-meter planting strip that's proposed.
Sorry, I thought the 7-meter was against the Crescent's Olga Lane and that.
Oh, through Mr. Mayor, were you talking about the wetland buffer, Councilor?
Yes.
Oh, yes, okay. Through Mr. Deputy Mayor, the wetland buffer has been included within this shape. We've also squared it off just for some better lot geometry, but essentially the edge of the wetland feature is about 15 meters in from this and comes out to here. The policies of the secondary plan would require another 50 meters, which brings us close to the edge of Sugarloaf Street. So through that environmental study, it was confirmed that it would be appropriate to reduce it with no negative impacts to that feature.
Thank you. So in your presentation, you mentioned as a side note to that this wasn't put into play to increase the number of units. Did I hear you right?
Through Mr. Chair, yes, that's correct.
So that reduction was used then for what purpose?
Through Mr. Chair, the reduction was put in place to get a better lot geometry. We were certainly dealing with a bit of a tight space here in terms of getting a good layout and making sure that we could evenly space the development across all of our constraints. So that was part of the reason for doing that.
So I thought you were saying that though at the junction there, it provided for a better plan, but the 30 meters would have went from bottom to top of screen in the wetland? Would it have gone all the way to the top?
Through Mr. Chair to the question, the buffer would follow all of the dark green. So a 30-meter buffer, so another 15 on top of this edge, would follow around the entirety of that feature, as well as the feature to the south that would bring it out even further.
So just on that outer edge then of units, if that extra 15 meters would have encroached into what is now the brown, right, which are the homes,
Yes.
then that plan, if it was kept the same, would have to shift, no?
Through Mr. Chair, that's correct.
And that would have still fit in then at the other end or been used up within the development?
Through Mr. Chair, that would require us to look at a reconfiguration of the plan. To my comment, the buffer was set up in a way to figure out what was the most appropriate way to protect the feature and what's the most reasonable way. Typically, a 15-meter buffer is appropriate on a wetland, and although in this case it does facilitate better geometry and more development, it wasn't the only reason it was done. A 30-meter buffer typically needs to be planted as conditions of approval and left for long-term stewardship with the municipality, which may not be desirable in this case.
I can see that it's not an area that was backing out of housing. That's what I was most concerned of. So thank you for pointing out that area. That's all I have for now, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Bruno. Councilor Elliott?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through to the presenter. On one of the original layouts that we saw, the apartments in the corner were designated as apartments. But now in your presentation tonight, you've changed it from 2 apartment buildings to townhouses, 1 apartment, condominium. Is that correct?
Through Mr. Chair, our application proposed through the site-specific zoning the use of the land for block townhouses, which is a condominium townhouse or an apartment building. So I think that might have just been a misnomer from staff on that.
Okay, because the one I'm looking at shows the 2 buildings.
Through Mr. Chair, this is just a conceptual development plan. We just showed it with the apartment buildings for the purpose of providing a colorized plan for the benefit of the reviewers. We could provide another one that showed the townhouses as well.
Okay, and the reason I ask is because in staff report, it says residential 4th density zone, apartment dwelling, minimum lot area per unit in our bylaw is 125 square meters per unit, and it wants to be reduced to 103 square meters per unit. And that's an apartment dwelling. It doesn't say townhouses or condominium. It just says apartments. So that is based on 2 apartment buildings?
Through Mr. Chair to the question, the density change, site-specific zoning for the apartment specifically, is based on our conceptual layout where we felt we could get about 96 units in apartment buildings on there. When it comes to doing a condominium townhouse layout, of course, you're going to use up more ground area and your density is going to go down significantly, but we felt that there was no need to amend any of the provisions related to the block townhouses, save and except for some setbacks.
So then they ask for the reduction to 103 square meters per unit would be off the table then?
Through Mr. Chair, the reduction for 103 square meters is to facilitate the 96 unit apartment concept should it go forward for development. That relief is required based on the size of the parcel to achieve the density, which comes into conformity with the density that's asked for the overall plan.
So you're asking for that just in case you build the apartments, but on the other hand, you might build something else?
Through Mr. Chair, is to provide some flexibility in the zoning depending on the market conditions. We have it set up where it could be built as an apartment. However, if there's no market for the apartment, it does provide the flexibility for a similar medium to high density residential product, which is contemplated by the secondary plan.
Okay, that's all for right now.
Thank you, Councilor Elliott. Any other questions from councilors at this time? Councilor Hoyle?
I have a quick question through you, Your Worship. I noticed that along the east side, where is it? We're now at 7 meters along the east edge to the crescents, and then I look at the original, obviously it's from 2012, as you said, and the bumper zone is a lot bigger. you explain to me why it's not even wider? Because I was thinking that that was a corridor that whatever wildlife actually is between the two wetlands, they could migrate in and out of that area through a little strip now that's only 7 meters. About 22 feet is kind of pretty small. So would you like to answer on that?
Certainly through, Mr. Chair. The intent of that 30-meter buffer for the environmental conservation area was based on an assumption of migration of species that would be using that corridor to get through the wetlands, like you were saying. Through the environmental impact study that was completed, it was identified and confirmed that the migration actually takes place along the existing stormwater channel. That's where the migration takes place in there. And with the improvement to the channel and the adjacent lands, it provides about a 30-meter corridor where species would be able to traverse and go through between the two features. So on-site verification confirmed that the migration is not up against the residential units. It's in fact in the center of the site. And so the intent and purpose of that corridor has been maintained through the trail and through the channel. And there is a lot of discussion about, well, was supposed to be a green area to back on existing development, so we've compensated for that, putting in a 7-meter buffer that will be planted with native species and everything to provide that screening, but also to provide a smaller corridor for smaller size urban wildlife, so like your raccoons, foxes, stuff like that.
Councilor, anything else? I do have one or two questions. You just mentioned environmental impact study. Who was it done by? Was it done by your corporate company or?
To Mr. Deputy Mayor, it was done by Ecological Environmental Solutions in consultation with LCA Environmental, 2 local consulting firms.
Was it peer reviewed by ministry, or did ministry have any input on that study or not? Or, I know it's probably not needed.
To you, Mr. Chair, so how the process works for environmental impact study is our consultant, in this case, Ms. McDonald, prepares a terms of reference which outlines all the things that, based on their review of the site, should be studied. That terms of reference goes to Niagara Region and it goes to the MPCA, who confirm or add or change that scope. Once we have that scope, they go and undertake the work. Those reports are reviewed by the MPCA and the region currently under the current planning regime, and they will provide comments back. But as Mr. Schultz alluded to, we do not have detailed comments back from either agency at this time.
And I'll just continue. And I know there are some restrictions on the, I guess, Westwood section number 2 on lighting and stuff like that for some of the houses going into the ditching. Would that also be affected by a ministry order or MPCA or?
Sorry, to the first part of the question, there's a restriction on what?
On lighting, the overflows from
light spillage.
property. Yeah.
Light spillage. Yes, to you, Mr. Chair. Photometrics plans would be prepared as part of detailed engineering, and what those do, in this case, as a subdivision, it would identify all the light volumes that are generated by any of the street lights. Sometimes there's provisos which are added into subdivision agreements where things need to be registered on title, saying that if you do happen to back onto a natural heritage feature, you need to use downcast lights or a certain type of fixture that's of a certain requirement. We've seen that in a lot of instances, and we dealt with something similar when we were doing some severances for Mr. Schultz on Block 74. In phase 2 previously. So it has been a condition that's come up, but we would be doing some light modeling through our engineering design.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Rowe. Councilors, any more questions? Or okay, I'll give you a break right now. Thank you, Mr. Rowe. For the public, I will allow you, the speakers up in a minute. Clerk makes me do procedure stuff, so I got to do procedure stuff, then we'll get to the public. Mr. Schultz, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Before opening the meeting to the public, I'd like to read the following. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Port Colborne before a decision on the proposed official plan and or zoning bylaw amendment is passed by council, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the City of Port Colborne Council to the Ontario Land Tribunal. And further, if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submission to the City of Port Colborne before a decision on the proposed official plan and or zoning bylaw amendment is passed by council, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. To any interested members of the public in attendance, if you'd like to receive future notices regarding these applications, you can contact me by email at david.schultz@portcolborne.ca or by phone at 905, oh thanks Simon, 905-835-2900, extension 202, or you can also contact the acting city clerk, Charlotte Madden. Finally, there is a sign-in sheet at the back of the room, as my colleague Chris pointed out earlier. I think he said on the left side. So for any interested members of the public in attendance, you can sign your name on the sheet and you'll be mailed a notice or provided a notice at that time. At this time, Your Worship, if there are any interested members of the public who wish to speak to the applications to do so, this is the time. Thank you.
Thank you for the red tape stop, Mr. Schultz. There are, this is two, but one delegate registered to speak on item 4.2 from the audience. We'll give everybody else a chance to get up there. There are a few virtual people that are registered to do a presentation, so I will call on the registered people first. There is a 10-minute time limit, and please recognize that. And when you come up to the podium, please state your name and address. And I guess Mrs. Arcaro doesn't have to say her name and address anymore. We know her. Janice, you want to come up, please?
Only wish I could type as quickly as Mr. Rowe spoke. But I do have some notes. May I sit here? That's good. All right. First of all, thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor and Council, for allowing me to present to you tonight on behalf of my neighbors, many of whom are here today, and I'll refer to them as my little community within the boundaries of Port Colborne community, a little community of which my family and many of my neighbors have been a part for 30 to 40 years. Me personally, 38 years. I represent not only the owners, the homeowners who are directly affected by I'm calling it the demonstration plan, I believe it's called. In other words, those whose properties, like mine, border the area, but also those who fully support our position, which is outlined along with our concerns in the letter that I provided for council. That letter was circulated and signed by 77 homeowners. I have those with me tonight. So I won't pretend to be an expert or have any firsthand knowledge of the potential fallout that is inevitable when the area known today as Schedule G is fully developed. But I have been told by experts that shrinking the floodplain lines will cause an increase in the severity and frequency of flooding due to less absorption of rainfall. There will be more pollutants in the waterways due to less natural filtration, and there will be increased erosion. One only has to walk the border separating the three crescents, Debbie, Kathy, and Lena, on which our houses border, and the development area, with a good pair of knee-high water boots, to observe that the effect that clearing the bush has already caused. Essentially, our backyards are flooded. One resident notes that her shed is sinking, literally. Mike Healy, a long-standing member of the Port Colborne and District Conservation Club, stated to council in an email, which you all have, I believe, the potential for damage to the wildlife in the area that cannot be ignored with this development. He is speaking, I believe, specifically to the wetland areas on which the buffer is proposed to be reduced. Every person that has been engaged in a discussion about the demonstration plan is aware that building must take place. None of us is arguing that. We're not standing in the way of development. The majority of us, however, had been told that the area is protected and there will never be building there, just for the record. As late as 2017, Mr. Rowe cited 2010 on that plan, but that's actually 2017 is the date on that Schedule G on the city's website. Our collective concerns, as outlined in the letter that we've all signed, are about parkland, trails, sidewalks, and schools. Not to mention, many are wondering how a closed-down hospital will serve all these newcomers in the over 300 proposed homes and dwellings. However, as I said, I am not an expert on any of these technicalities surrounding these issues. I would only state that I hope that the city, the engineers, and his staff there will have learned some valuable lessons from our neighbors in their failed attempts to build on water, namely the large complex on Prince Charles Drive, which has allegedly been built too close to the canal and is now collapsing, and also the failed projects in Dane City, which saw inhabited homes sinking into the water. And so I'll get to the point of my presentation. All the conversations that I've had with folks over 39 years that I've lived on Debbie Crescent and official city documentation regarding the area in question details an environmental conservation area. Well, it's gone, but it can be seen as that brown corridor that is to the rear of the homes on Debbie, Kathy, and Crescent, rather Lena. And I will say at this time, it's interesting whether it was subconsciously stated or not, that Mr. Rose said the area is bordered by Olga Drive to the east. Well, surprise, it's not. It's our 3 crescents. But anyway, we're there. The colored area is an approximate 100-foot area bordering the 3 crescents. As I stated, it's referenced as Update 2017 on the website, the city's website. I guess my point is that over the years, my neighbors and I had all been of the understanding that it was Mr. Schultz Sr.'s wishes that that corridor be there as a buffer, and a substantial corridor, I will state, as a buffer for our properties from whatever happens on the other side of it, even though in our lifetime we were told that we weren't going to have any building. Those were his wishes. And I think we should honor those wishes. I'll speak to that in a minute. We have 77 residents whose signatures are on our letters, and we have a proposal for you, for council, that the conservation corridor be reinstated on the development plan, and the area be infused with mature trees, I agree, deciduous trees, or whatever for that matter. Some of the ones that were knocked down in the last 2 years would have been quite handy. We'd all suggest that a trail be incorporated, perhaps a wood trail, into that buffer area. And that trail, we envision connecting to the trail access in Block 193 of the development plan. Is it possible to have that up there again or no? Well, anyway, I think you folks know what I'm talking about.
Could you get it back up, please?
Oh, I'm so sorry. No? Much easier to demonstrate with a picture. As I said, this is the crux of the matter for us. We could talk all day about the development and environmental plans and all the rest of it, but none of us are experts on this subject. However, we are experts on our backyards and how much flooding is going on right now, because that whole area separating us from Cement Plant Road has been raised of trees and shrub and etc. There we have it. Okay. So over here, Block 193, you can see the trail coming down, and it says trail access on the bottom here. Trail access, we're proposing, would connect the buffer right over to from one wetland to the other. And our purpose in having that, as I said, would be the mature trees and whatnot would provide noise and pollution barrier, especially when construction begins. It would provide a natural wind barrier to mitigate the flow of dust and debris that will land in our yards. I can't even imagine what my pool is going to look like when the development starts back there. I'll probably have to close it. It would protect the existing wildlife and endangered species that are out there, such as the osprey and the Fowler toads, which we have proof of being in our yards, lo and behold. Most importantly, though, it would allow for absorption of the water that has been displaced so far from the clearing of the lands. And if it were done right away, it could be a stopgap measure so that, again, we don't have sponges in our backyard for the next however many years before that end of the construction begins. Lastly, I think it's telling that Mr. Rowe mentioned, I'll see, two things. He said that these roads would create a sense of community, right? How you've got them in divots and whatnot. I forget what the word was you used. A sense of community for these folks in the subdivision. He also suggested that, I forget what the point was. As I said, I couldn't type as fast as you were speaking. But something reflected community needs. Again, part of the plan would reflect the community needs. Our little community, we're not much different than, say, Tennessee Avenue with their little community. Could you imagine if, because some government law came down, somebody decided to build a condominium behind the hospital, just for fun if it were allowed? We are a little community. We're well established. We've been here for 20 to 40 years. We're proud of our little section of town, and as established community members, we give back to the community. We're involved in the community. We have businesses in the community. We're not just folks coming in from out of town and saying, gosh, we don't want our backyards flooded. That's not what we're saying. But to reference community in the new subdivision is exactly my point. Our little community, from which I've collected 77 signatures, is behind this proposal that there be an established buffer. Another point Mr. Rowe made was that the trail, if I understood you correctly, going along the drainage portion, which is noted in blue on your plan, would serve for a trail, right? Did I get that correct, sir? Sorry, through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. That's interesting because may I ask, through you, sir?
Actually, Mr. Carroll, what the procedure is, you can ask any question you want, and when it comes back to council,
Yes.
every answer to anybody's question is going to be written down and replied by staff or consultants. So
I
I
understand.
forgot to mention that, so
I'm sorry.
I sort of screwed up, sorry.
No problem. Then I won't ask directly, but I will state that my concern over your comments about the drainage serving both the Westwood developed area and the new proposed developed area is that blue area. How deep will that be? And should then we be worrying about fencing it because the 3-year-olds are going to go swimming in it when mommy's not looking? That's my concern. But also, I can't envision people walking along a running water, I'm assuming it will be exposed, area to go for a little hike. But anyway. Mr. Rowe commented that the buffer area, would not be shortened from 30 to 15 to enhanced development or whatever. But in fact, I think we got to the bottom of that. And I will say also that over in the developed Westwood area, I know personally of a lot that has about a 7-foot, backyard once you put your deck on it. So I guess my point is that if people want to build along the buffer, they can have their shortened lots and leave the buffer alone. And to that point, the study that was done on that buffer and was determined that a shortened area would sustain the wetland area. I'm curious when that study was done. And are we talking about maintaining, let's say, the vegetation in that wetland area? Or are we speaking to the wildlife that also lives in that area? And the study that was done on the development area, the environmental study, I'm curious if that was done, I believe it was done because I live right there, but I'm curious if it was done after the whole area was raised, and so therefore, gosh gee, the deer are hitting Cement Plant Road instead of coming behind my house anymore. You talk about small urban animals. Well, that's a hoot because right now, every animal you can imagine, from deer to coyotes to foxes to snapping turtles and bunnies and opossums, are making their way down Olga Drive morning, noon, and night chasing dogs, people, and bicycles because they are not comfortable for whatever reason in this demonstration plan area that they no longer have. I mean, they have access to, but it's a wide open area. So for whatever reason, you talk about migration, so be it. But I think we're talking about, since we cleared the area, what's going on now versus what it could be if we reinstate that buffer area and allow the wildlife to, as Mr. Hoyle mentioned, allow them to travel from the wetland, across the buffer to the other wetland. And I'll be bold enough to say, too, that we're even proposing, I might not have the agreement of everybody, but that little trail be called the Lester Schultz Trail. And as Mr. Schultz Jr. Appears to be exiting the community as a stakeholder, this will be a legacy for his father, which I'm sure his family will appreciate, and we'll have no concerns about that. If you wouldn't mind, I just make sure I've got all my notes
Can
here.
you finish after 2 more minutes?
Yes, sir.
Janice, thank you.
I will. Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. All right, I'll just sum up by saying that, I'm sorry, one more question. If the NPCA comes back after their review and determines that work needs to be done on these buffer areas, or, I'm sorry, the buffer, shrinking area or our buffer area, I can assume then that would be, cause the plan to change and reconfigure the housing, as Mr. Rowe mentioned, would have to happen if something were to change. So that would be good. So to sum up then, as I said, I believe you're looking at a group, I'm not sure who, I know most of them, but you're looking at a group that is determined to see this happen because, number one, we are a community. We are stakeholders here. We've been here a long time. We think it's important for the wildlife to be able to use that buffer to travel wetland to wetland, protected area to protected area. And we don't see, I will just say one other thing. We don't see any point in having copious housing at the expense of the wildlife and the protected species that are back there. And lastly, I will say, I feel hoodwinked, quite honestly. Had I known in 2017, 2012, that I'd be staring at 3.5 houses in my backyard, literally in my backyard, after having purchased my home with what I had up until 2 years ago, I probably would have aggressively sought to buy the house that the mayor is living in right now, because he'll have no growth behind him. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Let me just get, okay. Yeah, I just have one question for you, Janice. You mentioned a letter signed by 77 people. Council did receive written delegates from Jennifer William, Mike Healy, Gary Tate, Sandra Megan Second. You mentioned there's a letter signed by 77 residents. I don't see a record of 77 residents signing a letter, as my fellow councilors haven't. I can assure you council will read every letter that comes to us, but could you provide the clerk with the complete signatures?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Acting Mayor, sorry. I did advise Ms. Madden that I did have these letters. We had a little discussion briefly about the best way to present them. I didn't think it made sense to photocopy 77 times 910 to be a part of your package. If I've erred, I'm sorry, but I have them with me right now, and I'm happy to hand them over.
Okay, the clerk can verify it. I'm happy with that.
Yes, very good.
Janice. Councilors, do you have any questions for Janice? Councilor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Janice, for your excellent presentation. Janice, when obviously that land was behind your homes was cleared earlier than the development. So you're suggesting that when the trees were there and the bush was there, your respective backyards did not flood?
100%, sir.
Okay. And so now, how long has that been, and to what extent is it, if you can kind of elaborate on that?
Yes. They were cleared in 2020 in the Friday night so nobody could get a hold of anybody. The construction or the raising started. They've been groomed since to further clear the area. The extent of the flooding, as I said, one homeowner, her shed is literally sinking into the ground. The person told me this much. I haven't seen it personally. My backyard is just pools of water towards the boundary. My next door neighbor, Mrs. Armstrong, you could put, it's like a trampoline out there, the sponginess, and it's coming right up. A third neighbor in Lena has told me that the water is basically up to her pool. Her backyard is flooded up to her pool. And then another neighbor told me that they tried to walk into the field recently, and the water was up to their knees. I can tell you one silver lining to this whole thing is we've had fun skating out there this winter on all of the ponds. So there's a lot of water. And the buffer that we're asking that be reinstated, again, I'm not technical, but I would suggest that that area of trees and bush was there to absorb or did absorb the water that would have come into our yards. And now 99% of it is gone.
Do you think the grade's been changed, so it's aiming towards your house now? So
The what, sir?
the grades?
No.
So when they pull that out, you
No.
still think the grade is exactly the same, but the trees are
Correct.
gone?
The trees are just cut off, cut down. There's been no movement of land, if you will. No soil
Right.
movement, nothing. Just
Okay.
everything's been cut down. I can see clear across to Cement Plant Road, and I've never been able to do that in 38 years. So.
Great. Mr. Acting Mayor, I may want to come back to Mr. Rowe, but it would be, I think, it would be better if it was at the end with all these questions from the rest of the presenters. Is that fine?
That's fine. I'll give council a chance to ask more questions later, after the delegates.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janice, very much. Appreciate it. And there is one virtual delegate who is registered, Mr. Halinga. We'll bring him up right now, I'm hoping.
Microphone check.
Yeah, we hear you, Jack.
Okay, thank you. Jack Hellinga, Port Colborne, Ontario. I wasn't going to discuss a number of these things. My focus is water and wetlands, et cetera. But I did hear in the presentation that there's my total 315 units and that the commercial section has been cut out. 315 units, probably 600 to 1,000 residents. And is there no availability of property for commercial and the convenience stores or a laundromat or a cleaners or other small service facility allowed for in an area that is going to house close to 1,000 people? The other was regarding the wetland connectivity and the intention to I guess, put signs up and tell the wildlife to follow the drainage channel and the trail that's going to go up along the channel rather than its natural direction of travel between the wetlands. Corridors with vegetation are much more apt to be used than bare drainage channels and groomed trails. Just comments. Thank you. My questions, I guess, are focused around the wetland and the reduction of the buffers when I sat on the board of the NPCA, we amended the policy document and the policy and procedures review document, and it requires a minimum 30-meter buffer or setback from wetlands, and I would presume that the NPCA staff is going to follow the policy document to enforce that. But I did hear that an EIS was conducted as well as a water balance. And when they did the water balance, did they recognize that when you start putting infrastructure adjacent to a wetland and bury infrastructure well below the top water level of the wetland, that you are going to draw down the water table in that wetland, unless you do some very extensive engineering in order to prevent the water flow. Infrastructure like sewers, storm sewers, and sanitary sewers have to be below the basement floor levels. Thus, they will be into the groundwater table. Any cracks in the joints, any cracks between the manholes and the piping, anything at all that will allow water in will go into those systems. However, those pipes are also buried with a porous material. Granular A will carry water. It's a French drain. And so unless you block the French drain from flowing along those pipes, the water will also flow along those pipes. And then what are you draining? You're draining basements. And those basements are potentially set into the water table as well. We made this suggestion in phase 1 and phase 2, and I guess it's worth repeating in phase 3. Unless the city is looking to provide pumping to keep the water table down, they should prevent the basements from being put down into the groundwater table, and the consequential drawing down of the water table from the adjacent basements. 30-meter setback will prevent that to some extent, but when you're only 15 meters away and then basements are only 5 meters from there, you have a cone of influence around every basement. So you are going to have a whole channel of interconnected basements drawing down the entire water table all along that north boundary of this proposal. So I think that has to be written into the site plan agreement to ensure that there is an absolute trench barrier to prevent the drawdowns around the wetlands. And what one good way of doing that is increasing the buffer width. That's my presentation, and thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Jack, and I'm sure Mr. Schultz will address your questions you had tonight, and so I appreciate you coming on. It's 2 nights in a row I've heard to talk. Have a good night, Jack.
Thank you, and just a summary: you don't build a house on a sand dune, and you don't build a house in a swamp.
Thank you, Jack. The next registered virtual delegate is Mackenzie McAvoy. Our clerks will bring him up shortly. Okay. Mr. McAvoy, you can now join the meeting. If you could turn it on, please. apparently he left the meeting. I would now open it up to the public in the audience that have not registered. Council will love to hear your comments and questions, and just remember that any questions from the public, you may not get an answer at this second. It will go to staff, and when it comes back to council for the final, what's the word I'm looking for, Mr. Schultz? Recommendation, that's the big word. That the answers to all your questions will be in that recommendation, and I can assure you, and council does watch that very closely. So, are there any members in the audience that would like to come up and speak? Yeah, the gentleman in blue. Oh. Please come up there, push the red button, give us your name and address, and away you go. Not away from here, but you talk.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. My name is Robert Arthur. I live at 136 Olga Drive. I don't back onto the property, but I've had to deal with the closeness to the wetlands. I have a question. It was brought up that they had done a survey on the water flow in that area. Can you tell me when that was done? Was it done like 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 1 year ago?
Mr. Schultz, is that a question we could answer?
Oh, yes,
tonight,
I was actually, I'm sorry, I'm looking at it.
Yeah.
Potentially, if council wishes to ask that to the consultants at the end, that might be an appropriate time for that.
Okay, thank you.
Because I have a motion or information to pass on that when they took those trees out 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I had to deal with a sump pump that wouldn't work enough. So I changed my sump pump from a 25 horse to a half a horse to a full horse that runs now every 15, 20 minutes. When before it would run for months without coming on at all. And that's since those trees went out. I have to, and we're at a good distance from that. We're at least 30 meters from the wetland line, but I've had to deal with the groundwater that was influenced and flowing readily underground. You may look at the surface, but I don't think you've looked at how the ground law. The bedrock is very low, and it varies from area to area. But it's been a serious problem we've had to deal with. And by putting the houses up and lowering the amount of saturation that's available, it's got to be an influence because the water still flows downhill. Thank you. I just wanted to make a point that it's affected not just the properties backing onto that. It goes for a ways too.
Thank you very much, Mr. Arthur. Appreciate it. I saw the gentleman in the blue. Please come up, state your name and address, and push the red button. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Scott Simons. I'm on 662 Stanley Street, Port Colborne. Is it possible I'd be able to get that previous sketch put up just so I can kind of give some perspective to council, and that way they'll have a better idea where I live. So the wetlands are south of my property. I purchased my property in 2017. When I purchased that property, I was told that there would never be anything behind me. That was really important to me because I previously lived in Fenwick. I had a bad experience with a rear neighbor, a giant solar panel right up against the fence in my backyard, 6 feet towering above the fence. It's a long story, I won't get there, but needless to say, there was nothing we could do about it because at the time I never had a chance to speak beforehand, which is the reason why I'm speaking today. So it was pretty important that I had nothing behind me. And if the previous plan, I think it was Schedule G, showed the original plan that had the buffer zone behind. If I can just show you here, I think I can Stanley Street, nope, other one there.
She's just making the jump.
That's okay. Okay, that's the one. All right, so that's my lot, right there, 662 Stanley Street. I'm assuming that's the channel, the drainage channel. That's block 74 right next to my house. So Rick Cuno's got a lot, there's block 74 with the drainage channel, and there's my house. Bought that lot again for the purpose of not having anybody behind me. It was my understanding that basically the southwest corner of my property, going on about a 30 to 40 degree angle, to the southwest would be protected right along the channel, along the berm. There's a bunch of cedars and everything along there. Tons of nature. Total bonus, looking out my back window and, being able to see all the nature and stuff like that. That's what I purchased. That was my understanding, was that I was purchasing nothing. Now I'm a little confused because the buffer zone has changed from 30 meters to 15 meters, which is pretty significant. And if I'm understanding it correctly, based on my backyard, there's a parkette here. And this right here, this cutoff on the corner here, that originally when I purchased the lot, the intention was for that lot to be rectangular. Then the MPCA got involved and wanted to have a buffer so that the corner of my property was a great enough buffer away from the drain and away from the wetlands and the protected area. So they actually cut off a corner of my property. And I still purchased the lot, despite all that. And I purchased it because of all the nature and not having anybody behind me. And so I thought that's fine. Now, and actually when I purchased it too, I also got a copy of what I guess it was been phase 2 or whatever of this particular plan that showed that buffer and showed that line and showed that there would be nobody behind me. So I was satisfied and I purchased the lot. That was in 2017. Now, it appears that that buffer zone has moved enough that, and depending on which diagram you look at, whether it be this one or some other ones, this one, it appears the parkette is intruding on my backyard view. There's other diagrams that look like it goes all the way across my backyard. And I guess my issue is that's not what I purchased. And here we are 6 years later, and I'm here in front of council, and I can't believe I'm here in front of council having this fight. So that's what my issue is. I know everybody else in the room has different issues. But that's my issue is I purchased nothing behind me. And now I'm going to have a parkette behind me. So I don't want it. I don't want a parkette. Call me a grumpy old man, doesn't want to park behind him. I don't want to park behind me. I don't want anything behind me. I like the nature. This afternoon or this evening when I had dinner, I looked out the back window. The osprey went flying by with a fish in his mouth. I don't know. Is that still going to happen? And I'm also concerned about this. The MPCA cut off this corner, but yet I'm really surprised that they're allowing this buffer to move this way and create a parkette. And I'm really wondering how they're letting the path go all the way through the wetlands. And I'm a little concerned about where that ends up. I mean, kind of doing the math and look at the size of these lots, it looks like it's somewhere in the 300-foot zone behind my house. But I don't really know what's going to get cleared out there. There's lots of nice cedars and stuff. Like I said, it's starting to look really good back there, wildflowers and stuff, and I just don't know what that's going to look like. And again, that's not what I purchased. So that's really all I have. Oh, I had one other question. And maybe, again, earlier, Craig Rowe knows me well, by the way, because when we went through this, cutting of the lots and stuff like that, we were on the phone a lot about Block 74 and that kind of thing. So hello, Craig. But I did hear earlier, and again, when I was talking, we couldn't really see out in the audience, but there was something about a trail going along I think it was along here. Did I hear that right, or, yes? And where will that be going, like all the way down to basically the parkette in my backyard, or what are we talking about here? Again, I'm not saying he has to answer right now, but I would like to know that. Anyway, that's all I had.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It is my understanding the NPCA has not made their final approval yet. So I'm sure your questions are going to get answered. I do appreciate you coming up here and expressing your concerns, so. Please don't clap too much because I get heck from the clerk. There's supposedly a bylaw that says you're not supposed to clap in council, so I get heck every time you guys clap, so. The lady in the black, or is that Penny? Penny? Oh, come on up, Penny. I just pushed the red button, Penny, and I know you live in Park Home. Just give us your address, and we'd be
Do I
happy.
have to leave it, hold it down, or can I
Nope.
go now? Okay. I'm Penny Armstrong. I live at 16 Debbie Crescent in Port Colborne. And hello to everyone, and thank you for letting me come up here and speak. I'll be short and sweet. 30 years, no, I guess it wasn't 30 years ago. 30 plus years ago, I bought my property. 12 years ago, I was here with Mr. Lester Schultz, who did his presentation for us, and we got to see what was happening. And we had a 30-meter buffer behind our house. We were assured then that it would not be touched. Never in your lifetime will you see that move. It will be there. It's a conservation corridor for the animals. Now I'm hearing it's a 7-meter one, and it will never be touched. I'd like to see the original one reinstated as it was, as we were told it would be. I was disappointed to see that it was removed and cleared against our official plan before anyone even knew what was happening to it. I tried to stop them, and I tried to say, you've got the wrong area. You're in the wrong 30-meter area. This is protected. It can't be touched. No, this is where we're supposed to clear it. And I find that very difficult, and I find it hard for all of the people that live in this area that all felt the same way. And there's nothing we can do about it except read 410 pages in 15 days, because that's basically all we were given. So that's almost all I want to say. I'm the one that has the yard that's like a sponge. It's not draining. It hasn't drained since the area was cleared. There was something else that was said. I fully agree with what Mr. Simon said, that you buy a piece of property, you assume, because you are told that nothing is going to be touched, that you're getting the right answers, nothing is going to be touched. And to turn around and find that you're going to have a mass of homes put through there so that the natural corridor is now gone is very disheartening. It's disheartening to see the animals that just don't know where they should be going anymore. It's hard to see the coyotes coming into my yard when I've got dogs in my yard, but they have no place to go either. Everything's been cleared out. It's just, it was gone, just removed, boom, like that. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think that should happen in our city. That's all I have to say, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Penny. Appreciate you coming up here. Any other people? Okay, I saw the gentleman over here first. Go ahead, please. State your name and address and push the red button, please.
Hi, my name is Dave Lalouette. I live at 277 Lakeshore Road West here in Port Colborne. I'm basically asking for a little clarification. I'm not against development. It obviously affects everybody as long as it's done in a minimal way. Obviously, it's good for our taxes. It's good for some things. I understand people's frustration with not wanting things developed right behind them, purchasing property as my property backs onto conservation itself. Mike, I just wanted a little clarification. How many meter setback is it from the proposed townhouse area and the housing that's facing the adjacent park to the creek that runs behind there?
I don't know the actual dimensions. Is Mr. Schultz, would you have that, or?
I don't have that off the top of my head, Mr. Deputy Mayor, but perhaps that could go to the consultant
Sure.
if they have that available to them.
That's
I'm
okay
not
with
sure.
council? Good, sure, no problem.
Okay, and will there be a sidewalk constructed along Cement Plant Road once this development is done?
Through you,
Mr.
Deputy
Schultz?
Mayor, we haven't finalized those design details at all, but to my knowledge, there wouldn't be. Because it's a partnership between Wainfleet, we wouldn't want a sidewalk necessarily on that road.
The only reason I'm asking is because it is quite a concern now that the roadway does come through. In the summertime, there's many people walking down the center of the road, basically. So with this subdivision being brought in there, many more people are going to be walking through the area. And with no place safe for them to walk, there's going to be more people on the roadways. My other big concern is, are we having separate storm sewers for each home there? And where are they going to? Are they all going to that drainage ditch?
Mr. Schultz, I know you know the answer to that one, so.
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, they would be, the storm water that's created from the development would be directed to the stormwater management pond, correct?
So everybody's home goes not to that ditch, they all go to the two ponds?
I'm not too sure exactly at this point because we haven't, again, finalized the engineering design of the subdivision. But the consultant may have more information on this and how they designed it. But
yeah, it's still preliminary, so that stuff has to get worked through.
There would be storm sewers that either bring the water to the ditch or bring the water down to the pond directly.
So my concern is whenever we have a storm now, they close the floodgate at Lakeshore Road. So once that gate is closed, the water in that ditch rises, it floods the conservation area behind my home. So I'm a little more concerned that with all this excess water being directed there, how much more water will be coming in there. And also at the opposite end, a lot of people here might not know, but on Schofield Avenue, first house in, we turn south on Schofield from Sugarloaf, there's a pump in the street. That pump pumps against head pressure constantly. And whenever that pump goes out, everybody on Olga, Schofield, and Hampton rely on that pump so that their sump pump doesn't continually run and flood their house. And we just had an instance on Hampton Avenue, I think it was in January, a few houses got flooded there because of that pump going out. I know my father's lived there for 69 years, so I'm very versed with what's going on there. I work within the water, wastewater, and department for another municipality, so I'm very versed with what's going on here at the city. I just have a concern that with this additional stormwater, how it's going to be managed and how it's going to affect that area and affect that pump. People in that area are all going to be affected, and I'm not sure people here realize there is that pump in that street, and then when your sump pump is running all the time, usually that pump has gone out. So I would just like a little clarification as to how that's going to be managed, if everything is just going to go to the storm ponds, or is it all going to be directed to the ditch?
I think a fair question, but that step comes next after the public meeting here. Engineering gets involved, and then that's all discussed and that's all figured out. It's a little bit too premature to give answers like that right now, but I'm sure staff could add it to the recommendations. They'll mention it when they have their final report to council.
Yeah, because I believe the residents would like to know just exactly how the stormwater especially is going to be managed, being that's going to be at a lot of excess stormwater in that area. Again, like, I'm not here to say we shouldn't have development. Development's good for the city, but as long as it's at a minimal effect to everybody. My only other question is, how many stories is the condominium?
That hasn't been decided yet. It's still preliminary.
What's the proposal for how many stories?
Looks like 5 on David.
Mr. Schultz, can you answer that one?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. As the applicant has noted, the apartment block that's set out, apartment/condominium townhouse block, is kind of left open for flexibility currently to determine which direction they want to go with the development. But on the conceptual plan, they did have their apartment buildings, I believe they were 5 stories proposed, with 48 units each to equal the 96.
Okay.
All right, yeah, so in the new report coming up, they will clarify what's being done with the storm water?
I will specifically ask, how's that? It'd be in a site plan agreement, but it will be talked about. Mr. Schultz?
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I just want to chime in just to provide some input there. Typically, like I said, the stormwater management and the servicing of the property is still under review by our engineering staff. So we don't know for sure, if it's designed adequately yet. That is part of our review process. But I can say typically that it is a municipal requirement that when new developments come in, they're required to control their stormwater management flows and retain them on site and outlet them at a rate that's no higher than what is currently there. So that's typically the case. I'm not an expert, and I haven't been able to verify that or speak with our engineering staff specifically on that. But I can note that so they take a careful look at that.
Yeah, because I know they were very particular with myself building my own home. I had to put in my own catch basins to control the stormwater runoff before it went to the city's system. So I'm just wondering how that's going to be managed in the new one, that's all. Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Gentleman in the beige, I guess, the beard, the glasses, the hair, which I don't have. Yeah, state your name and address, please.
Okay, my name is Paul Bunting. I live at 51 Gaspar Drive, and it's not a unique situation, but it's probably a little less common than most people in here. So the Eagle Marsh drain actually goes through our property. I'm about a stone's throw from it, from my basement window, and when we're talking about drainage and whatnot, if it's going to be, sufficient now compared to after the subdivision has been built, currently it's not sufficient, right? As what my predecessor was saying, anytime we get a good wind and a storm, that gate closes, right, to stop the seiche from the lake. And then on top of that, on the other end, you have all the storm water that can't go anywhere, right? Those pumps are definitely insufficient to handle that load currently, right? Every time that happens, especially recently, we've had some stormy weather, that Eagle Marsh drain actually fluctuates upwards of 4 to 5 feet, right? When it reaches its highest, right, the water table is obviously at the same level, right? My basement is, there's water coming out every single pore in the floor, and I have 2 sump pumps that can't keep up, right? So with this subdivision going in, it sort of reminds me of building building a town on a delta, right? Like the water has to go somewhere, and currently it is not. So my question is also the same: is how is this going to be managed down the road? How is it going to be mitigated? We're talking about one woman here that said her shed was sinking, right? The water levels that we see, I don't know where you're going to put the water, right? When you've got 5 feet on one side of the gate and water piling up on the back side of it. To reference this a little bit back in the past, and I'm not sure if any traction has happened with this, but I believe about 2 or 3 years ago there was another public meeting at the engineering building in regards to the watershed area around this area. And one of the things that was brought up was that the Eagle Marsh drain is basically the end point for the entire watershed, and that the Biederman drain is blocked. So I don't know if any traction has happened on that. If anything is, like, the proposal was they were going to do a study, they were going to see what was going to happen and how they could mitigate against all of this watershed going through the Eagle Marsh drain, and it never went anywhere, as far as I know anyway. So I would like to know, if any traction has happened with that, right, to try and mitigate what's going on, with our water levels. But yeah, that's basically my issue is the basement flooding every single time, so.
I do recognize your concern, and
Yeah.
I can tell you that Eagle Marsh drain is being engineered right now by an outside consultant.
Okay.
It does take a few years to get it done It started during COVID.
Right, I do remember
And
that, yeah.
myself and Councilor Colina and Councilor Bogger have been on the course of revisions for the ditches. We just finished one yesterday, and there's another one coming up this month. So the drains are getting looked at, and that will be taken under consideration by the engineering firm.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Paula Burry Payton, and I live at 678 Stanley Street here in Port Colborne. We built our home very recently, and it overlooks the entire area that's under review. We have a beautiful view of Sugarloaf Hill, and when we were looking to build and purchase, we were told of all of the development, and we were completely fine. We completely understand, and again, we are not against development at all. But I do like to know things. And I guess my question to you, through you, Deputy Mayor, is it possible for us to see the pros and cons of 15 meters versus the 30-meter buffer? I know the consultants have done their environmental assessment, and I'm sure they have. But again, I'd just like to understand the difference and why it should be 15 meters. That's all. That's my question.
That's a very good question. I think there could be some verification when it comes back to council. They can
just
give
to
the
see the pros
explanation,
and
yeah.
cons, and that way we could have a better understanding of it.
Yeah,
That's all.
I think it's a great question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience? Lady over here. You see, I gave your name and address. The button's already pushed, so you give you a break tonight.
All right. So my name is Jessica Eckert. I'm at 236 Olga Drive. I have 4 small kids ranging in age from 8 to 15. Love about the area, it's a very unique community where we live. I think everybody will agree with that. It's kind of the best of both worlds. We have a little bit of, like, I grew up in the country. I grew up Stevensville, very much in the country. Loved it, loved the animals, loved the wild, loved the quiet. Then I moved to Port Colborne about 15 years ago. I moved to Elm Street. Oh my God, was it loud? I thought somebody was in my house every night. Literally, there was usually somebody breaking into my car every night. But and then I moved over to Olga Drive, and it was just like the first night. I was like, oh my God, what's that? Nothing. I heard nothing, and I loved it. It was like being home again. And so I've been in Port for 15 years. Absolutely love where I live right now. It's so quiet. I love animals. Anybody that knows me will attest to that. I've got way too many animals, way too many kids. And I love it. I'm an animal lover. You talk about these, oh, well, we're going to have these urban animals. Okay, those are garbage pickers, okay? The city has garbage pickers. We don't need them, all right? We've got beautiful animals coming our way. Like, probably at least once a week, I see a beautiful, healthy-looking fox go running through my crescent, sometimes with another animal in its mouth. And it's just, it's amazing, and we love it. All kinds of different amazing wildlife. And you're going to go and you're going to cut down these trees, and you're going to wipe out their homes. They're going to have nowhere to go. I saved a possum. Yes, I'm the crazy lady. If anybody saw me on Sugarloaf in a rainstorm, I'm the lady that saves the possum in the middle of a rainstorm. And I got a lady arguing with me over that. I don't want that thing in my yard, she says to me. And I'm like, where do you want it to go? Okay, the animals were here first. It's just how it is, okay? Animals were here first. We all got to learn to live together. That's just life, okay? So I think you all know where I stand with the whole buffer thing. Big fan of trees. I'm also a new real estate agent, so I'm also a fan of development. I'm a fan of houses. You need your house sold, give me a call, all right? So I am a fan of development, but I'm a fan of good development. And again, I love the new houses going in, I have to say. I think they're beautiful. And I love that about this area that we have, Westwood Estates. I'm proud to say you should see Westwood Estates. I tell people that all the time. They're gorgeous houses going in, and they look well built. Now, I haven't been inside enough of them to say for a fact, you know, they are strongly well-built homes. But from the outside, they look amazing. And I'd strongly recommend that to anybody. I sell Port Colborne to anybody in an instant because it's a beautiful, unique town. Now, you talk about an apartment building down in our end. I don't understand that. So that I need some clarification on. Apartment building down where we are. Do we have a bus stop down where we are? I have no idea. I've never seen a bus stop down where we are. Like, to me, apartment building, it doesn't make sense. And you've just said that we're not going to have any of that commercial down our end, which I'm good with. I don't want any commercial business down our end. We don't need it. We're good. Kids walk to the 7-Eleven if they need to. We've got a gas station, you know, down on Sugarloaf. We're good. We don't need any more because we got the best of both worlds. We got Cement Plant Road. We've got that beautiful pond and everything, the beautiful nature. It's wonderful. Absolutely love where we are. You want to put more houses in there? Again, I'm all for it. But if we could just, nice big buffer, best of both worlds, you know. And then you talked about a roundabout. And that really threw me off. Because I don't know about you guys, but if you've ever seen anybody try to do the roundabout in Welland, okay, I've seen, oh my gosh, I don't know how many trucks I've seen. They do not make it around there, okay? And again, I've got 4 small kids, so you talk about a roundabout being safer. I don't know about that, okay? People are usually approaching a roundabout going, oh my God, I don't know how to work this, because they're newer in Canada. We don't have a ton of them in our area, right? So not a lot of training going on in our driver ed classes for the roundabouts. Back in my day anyways, I'm not that old, but okay. Dating myself a bit. But anyways, so I don't know where the heck this roundabout's gonna go in over there, but that scares the crap out of me for my kids' sake, like them trying to cross or bike around, somebody approaching a roundabout is not worried about the pedestrians. They're worried about how am I getting into this roundabout? So those are some of my concerns. Again, I'm all for development. They're beautiful houses you guys are putting in. I'm all for that. But if we can just keep in mind the beautiful neighborhood that we have going on right now and just keep in theme with that, hey, you got my vote for what you're doing. Keep doing it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, and on behalf of council, thank you very much for saving that possum. So, any other members in the public would like to speak? We do have one more on virtual. Could Madam Clerk or Madam Deputy Clerk bring that person in? Oh, okay. Harley Robertson, are you there yet?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Your dime.
My name is Harley Robertson. I live at 254 Lancaster Drive. So if you look at that map, we're just north of House 1. I wasn't aware that there was so much new flooding issues that some of these other people have spoken about today. So I certainly don't want to say that we have priority over the things that they've brought up. But we have been dealing with flooding in our backyard since we've moved in. The drainage is supposed to, I guess it was designed to go into that flood basin that is on these new plans. But at the moment, it's basically a dam at the north end of this of that proposed property, and it doesn't go anywhere. So, our concern is what is the time frame for developing some of these stormwater management features for the existing homes on Lancaster or in these other areas like over by the Olga Street, because those are the flooding are things that the homeowners around this property are dealing with now, and I'm not sure what the time frame is for this entire development, but I'm sure that it's longer than we would like to wait for having some of those drainage issues resolved. So I would ask that be looked at earlier in the development plans rather than later, because it's already impacting people. I mean, that was sort of my question before we started this meeting. And then after hearing some of the conversations here, I would like to add my name in with those who are asking for that larger 30-meter wildlife corridor. I'm with the people who have been here for longer. The wildlife is certainly something that we moved here for. And we look at the ospreys, we look at the foxes. That is one of the best things about this area, and those should have priority. And then one more maybe odd note. I just learned during this meeting that the Fowler's toad is endangered, and we have been digging those out of our window wells since we moved in. So maybe a tip to new home builders in the area, keep that in mind and don't make too many window wells.
Are you done, Harley?
Yeah, that's pretty much all I had, was the one question about the drainage.
No problem, Harley. And I do suggest you also contact Public Works by telephone and talk to water and wastewater, and they can come over and take a look at it, even your situation right now.
It's the stormwater that we're looking at. So every time it has a heavy rain, we're depending on our neighbor who has a pump set up, because there's nowhere for the water to naturally drain to right now.
Okay, Harley, yeah, give City Hall a call tomorrow, and maybe we get somebody else to look at that problem you have right now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harley. We're gonna give Mackenzie McAvoy another shot. Virtual. Mackenzie, are you there? He left again. Oh, yeah. There's a story of my life. Okay. Anybody else from the audience? Ma'am, please come up. Push the red button.
Good evening. I just have one question.
Can you state your name and address, please?
Branka Zlamaslik, 614 Stanley Street. I have a question. We live close to the entrance to the park. Is that park going to be extended, or is there another area that park is going to be provided, green space, or I'm not sure I understood that map.
Mr. Schultz?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, which park are you referring to?
Sunset Park, the entrance to the, there's a park behind Stanley Street. Is that going to be extended, or that's it, that stays as for whole development?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe there are any plans to expand Sunset Park at this time.
Okay.
But if I can visualize the plan in my head correctly, I think the wetland feature is abutting Sunset Park. So that may be what you're referring to.
I see green space, so I wasn't sure what that is and how's that.
Yeah, so that's, through you, Mr. Mayor, that's proposed to be protected as how it is now, with like the forest and the trees and the wetland that's there.
So it's abutting the Sunset Park?
Yeah, but it's not going to be considered part of Sunset Park.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for coming up here. Any other members of the audience? Gentlemen?
Press the red button, right? You did already? Okay. My name is Mark Jansen. I live at 271 Lakeshore Road West. And I'm curious as to how many of those apartment units are going to be geared towards low-income housing. I wouldn't want the area that I live in to be like a dentist town in Welland with abandoned cars and all that kind of stuff, garbage floating all over the place. There's enough garbage floating around on Cement Plant Road as it is. People are using it for dumping grounds. I don't know. And I'm also concerned, like Dave had, about Dave lives 2 doors down from me. When it presently rains, the storm sewer in front of my home is full. So if you're going to be tying your storm sewers into the Lakeshore Road storm sewers, you're going to have a big problem. That whole area is going to be flooded. And you're going to also have an increase in traffic volume with all those units that you're going to be putting down there. And I don't know if you're aware, but I'm sure you are, that there's been serious accidents on Lakeshore Road based on the amount of traffic volume, because it's a quarter-mile drag strip. And Cement Plant Road is a quarter-mile drag strip, and putting the roundabout at the end of Cement Plant Road won't stop that. I'll tell you that right now. So, and I'm curious as to why you would put an apartment building close to Cement Plant Road by where the Sugarloaf Hill is, because I don't know if you drive down there, but you can't even get Wi-Fi reception or satellite reception in your vehicle when you're driving down there because it's completely blocked out. So all those people who live in that apartment building won't have any satellite reception. They'll never have any Wi-Fi. So that's just something to look into when you're planning that. So that's all I got to say.
Good. Thank you very much for coming up. I guess last call for the audience. Are we done with Percival, or we're going to give somebody another chance? Are we? Madam Clerk. 2 strikes? Okay. Okay, I know Councilor Bruno had a comment or a question after everybody talked, so Councilor Bruno, did you want to?
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Actually, some of the other questions all tie into this issue of drainage, and it's probably better when the whole report comes back, and I'll have some questions then. I think if I could just say to the consultant, you've heard a lot about drainage tonight, and I get that the land is not supposed to drain off more than when the homes aren't there. I also get that the homes that back onto the crescents are going to each have a lot grading scheme, and all that is supposed to go to their street and in a storm sewer. But at the end of the day, I want to know all of that's built on everything going right. You have this lady over on Lancaster, that's a finished area. She may have a perfectly legitimate reason that has nothing to do with the development. Somebody could have, after the lot grading scheme, put a shed on the water course, and that's a civil matter then between two neighbors here. But I just want to know in your reports coming back, these loads for all these lots, that stormwater management pond, what kind of freeboard is there when you get into these now 1 in 50, 1 in 100-year storm? And is there an alternate when that fills up? Because there's no question that Eagle Marsh Drain behind this gentleman's house is filled. I know people live on Gaspar and back in there. So right now, it is problematic when we have storms. So I'd also like for you to look into, as people fill up these last remaining areas, and the outfall is the Eagle Marsh Drain, are they able, through the development fees or through the fees that build this development, well, money's there, and this may be more of Mr. Schultz's question than for the developer, are monies put in there to upgrade things like the pump? Because you're bringing more head-end pressure there. You've got a ditch that still, when the water management pond fills, is going to go into that ditch, and the water has to go somewhere. My concern is some of the fees out of these developments could aid the existing development by putting in pumps, upsizing, making the drain bigger, and I want you to speak to that, if not tonight, when we come back to that report, because certainly drainage is pretty front and center here tonight, so I'd like some more effort put into some of those answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bruno. Councilor Bogner.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Through you to the presenter for, yes. So, I don't really have anything. I just wanted you to run up there and back. So no, stop. So we've heard tonight from people in the Debbie Crescent, Kathy, Lena, that they're experiencing surface water coming onto their properties since there's been work done, tree removal and brush and everything else. So I know from working the drainage part in Ward 4 that you can't impose your water on somebody else. And it appears that your water is now coming on to those properties. Is there our drainage superintendent, I would assume tomorrow will know about this if she doesn't already, but is it as simple as, and it's never simple, but looking at the grading since that work has been done there and possibly putting a small berm to stop that surface water if it is indeed coming over? Because this development isn't going to happen for years. And right now, people have a problem. So is there a way you can look at that, determine if indeed that water is coming over? We can't stop that water that's on top of the rock coming that way. But you sure can do something about the surface water if it is coming that way. So I just wondered whether you could look into that and try to alleviate those problems.
Certainly. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the question, our consulting team, we do have a topographic field team. So what I can do is I can consult with our client and talk with our team and see if we're able to deploy some forces out there to go and get some ground shots, find out if there's any grade changes or anything, which would allow our engineers to make a determination if there's been an ill effect caused. And if not, we can still provide professional recommendations to the city about what might be an appropriate measure to mitigate those. And then, of course, wherever the responsibility lies, we can work with city staff on that to figure out the best way forward.
Okay, that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Wagner. Thank you, Mr. Rowe. Any more councilor questions? Okay, yeah. Mr. Schultz, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. If you wish to be notified of the approval of the official plan and or zoning bylaw amendment, you must make a written request to the clerk. Only those persons and public bodies that give the clerk a written request for the notice of adoption or passing of a zoning bylaw amendment or official plan amendment will be given notice. The proposed official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and draft plan of subdivision recommendation report will return to council at a future council meeting. This concludes my portion of the public meeting. I will now turn the meeting back to you, Deputy Mayor Bagu, to close the public portion of the meeting and receive the report for information.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. We have a motion on the floor that Planning and Development Department Report 2023-59 be received for information. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Motion is carried. Procedural motions. There are no procedural motions or information items this evening. Thank you, everybody, for attending tonight's public meeting. The meeting is now adjourned.
We'll call this special closed session meeting to order. At this time, if I can have Councilors Bodner and Bruno move the agenda. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all in favor? With regards to the enclosed session meeting, does anybody have a conflict of interest with the item on there? Seeing none. We have one bylaw, is bylaw 4.1. A bylaw to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne. If I could have Aquilina and Hoyle move that. Any questions? All in favor? Carried. At this time, if I could have Elliott and Danch move. The Council did not proceed into closed session in order to address the following matters. 5.1, Chief Administrative Office Report 2023-60, concerning the potential disposition of land pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001, subsections 2392C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. Subsection 2392E, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, and subsection 2392F, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. Questions? Favor? Carried. We do now move into closed session. We will not be coming back to open session. We thank everybody for tuning in this evening.